So after around a year at Snap, I started getting the itch to build product again. So I hit up Alexander, who I had met at Quora, and I was like, hey, like, we should apply to YC. So we started working on a bunch of side projects. The first one was ClassPass for clubbing. Like, it was a total failure. We were, like, the only people signing up were VCs exploring the product, which is when you know it was a failure as a consumer product, right? We ended up pivoting to, like, a healthcare app where the idea was that, like, we would help you find specialized doctors for specific treatments you need. So for example, like the best doctors for a root canal or the best doctors for like a jaw surgery. And then during that period of time, like we were like messing around, I was actually in an Uber car and then my Uber driver was like, oh, have you heard of Paige Craig? He coined the term Silicon Beach down in LA. And I was like, oh, no, but let me look him up. And I look him up and I think he already is following me. So I slide into his DMs and I'm like, hey, like I'm thinking about leaving Snap to go start a company, would love your advice. Met with him a few meetings and he's like, I want to do your seed round. He wanted like a few $1 million in allocation, but we had already gotten to YC at that point. So I was like, okay, you can have like $100,000. So he becomes our first investor, like actually before I think we even received money from YC. And then we end up going to Y Combinator with this healthcare idea. But then I remember like we were asking our group partners during YC, like, oh, like how many appointments will we need to book for us to be a top company in the YC batch? And they said a number where we're like, oh, like we're not hitting that. So like we're like thinking like whiteboarding ideas, et cetera. And then at the same time, I'm like venting. I'm like, man, I wish we had like someone to call doctors for us whenever this button is hit. And then one of our roommates who was also in YC was like, oh, you mean like an API for humans? And at this point I had built a lot of viral apps and I knew that that would go viral because it's extremely controversial, right? Like when you say API for humans, it's like you're dehumanizing humans and like replacing them with technology essentially. Or like, yeah, it's just like a dehumanizing term. So I was like, that's gonna go viral. Let's make a landing page and test it out. So we made a landing page, we made a janky API in like a weekend, and then launched it on Product Hunt. And that's when a bunch of investors approached us because it landed at like the top of Product Hunt. That was essentially the first version of Scale. It was called Scale API. We had initially believed that we were going to go after the BPO market. So we thought that like phone calls as an endpoint would be the most popular endpoint. It turned out that it was very hard to moderate the quality. For example, like anyone could send an API call, and then we started getting people trying to like call others to scam people. Or like, oh wow, this is rough. Around the same time, we got one of our one of our first customers that was a self-driving car company, and we're like, oh wow, like there's a lot of money in this market right now to spend. So we ended up doubling down on that sector. And we also realized around the same time, we're like, oh cool, like because we have all of the data in a structured format, we can eventually collect enough data to like start using machine learning on it. And then that was when we switched it from Scale API to Scale AI.